Belarus, known to us all here in the EU as Europe's last dictatorship, is on the agenda this week here in the European Parliament. It's over a year now since the last presidential elections, and over a year since around 50,000 people took to the central square of Minsk to protest against the re-election of President Lukaschenko. But Belarus, it still appears to be leap years away from democracy, and it's going on a completely different path to its neighbours here in the EU. Let's get some insight now from Olga Stuzhinkaya, the Director of the Office for Democratic Belarus here in Brussels. So thanks, Olga, for meeting me here today for a coffee.
Thanks, my pleasure.
So let's start with Lukaschenko. Before Christmas there, he had a press conference for international journalists where he said that relations with the European Union were worsening. Now, I'll just quote, he said that we didn't expect any good from the Polish presidency in the EU and our apprehensions have been fulfilled. So what do you think about that? I mean, this week there was a report on Belarus presented here in the European Parliament. No new revelations there, I'd say, were there?
No, and indeed, during the discussion in the Foreign Affairs Committee, it was said the situation in Belarus has gone from bad to worse after December 19th. And all the hopes to develop better relations between the EU and Belarus have gone in vain, basically. And what we see today in the country is the disappearance of the, so to say, remaining European islands there. You can see that the EU is totally not on the agenda for the government. There are new agreements being signed with Russia. There is more political and economic integration with Russia. There are some possibilities to receive loans from China. Basically, the EU is completely off the agenda.
Well, it's no secret that Lukashenko is not a big fan of the European Union. There is, of course, so many sanctions on himself and a blacklist of about 200 people. The EU are targeting him, of course, because it's no secret either that elections are just not fair in Belarus. Human rights are violated. There's no freedom of expression. People are spied on. So how is Lukashenko taking all this, and what's the kind of direct impact that these sanctions are having on him now, or is he paying any heed even?
Well, let's start with the fact that the EU has never implemented either the sanction policy, like with harsh economic sanctions, for example, which this will never take place, nor the EU has never gotten it into full engagement with this government. So the policy has always been kind of going half and half. But I think what is the most important, of course, Lukashenko has never been the fan of the European Union, but the population is. However little the Belarusians know what the EU is about, what the European values are, what the standards of living are, all the polling results show that they are in support of the Europeanization of the country. And I think this is a crucial point here. We have to listen to what the society of this country says.
Well, funny, a colleague of mine from the EUobserver, he was there this summer reporting from Minsk, and he said the general sentiment there was that the EU has no real clout there in Belarus, and that's why they will never really do anything to get rid of Lukashenko.
Well, the EU has limited tools to start with, because if you don't have any engagement with the country, if there are no strong links, no strong interests, then of course you have very little influence. And now what we see with the sanctions, whatever cosmetic sanctions the EU is introducing, like the visa ban, for example, this European space is shrinking, and we have less and less air for those pro-European initiatives to develop. Basically, all the assistance that the EU provides to Belarus, or wants to provide, is quite large and has grown after December 19th. But there is a huge problem with the implementation of this assistance. Because the more upset the government is, the less space have these pro-European initiatives to use this.
Well, Alexander Milinkovic, the man who went for presidency back in 2006, and he actually won a Sakharov Prize here in the European Parliament, he reckons that the EU is way too tough on Lukashenko and that he should be more lenient. Do you agree with that? Perhaps that could be a way to move forward?
The EU is not tough, but it should choose at this point, either or. Because to continue expanding visa ban lists doesn't bring us anywhere, really. It's, as it was said in the discussion in the Foreign Affairs Committee, someone commented that we do this to irritate Lukashenko. Is this the result we want from EU policy, to irritate Lukashenko and the government? We have to really see how to expand the influence of the EU there, how to talk to people, and 60% of the population today doesn't support either the government or the opposition. We have to talk to this 60% of people. We have to see how to engage with the broader civil society, not the usual suspects, so to say, those political opposition figures and like about 10 NGOs who have been always in contact with the EU. We have to see how to talk to the general population.
And just on a personal note, what's it been like growing up in Belarus with the KGB kind of absolutely everywhere I'm hearing?
I have grown up in a family of a historian. My mother is a researcher in the anti-Soviet movement in Belarus in the 1920s. And I have been engaged into this work that I'm doing now from a very young age, starting with the Chernobyl children programs and going on into more political work. And I'm leading the Office for Democratic Belarus here for about 5 to 6 years now. I think if you really believe into the European development of your country, if you really believe that this is possible and your country belongs to the family of democratic European nations, you can cope with it. I'm sad to say that you kind of get used to it, to operate under these conditions.
And what's it like now? I mean, the economy seems to be going from, as we said earlier, from bad to worse, and salaries are dropping. What's it like on the streets? Belarus?
You really see that people were in shock when the economic crisis has hit and the salaries have gone down 3-4 times. But Belarusians are looking for ways how to cope with it. Many of them, for example, have left to work abroad, mainly in Russia, because of the easier movement with Russia, because of the absence of language barriers. There is big dissatisfaction. But they also don't see any forced alternative to the government who could help them to reform, who could help to bring change. So people look for different ways how to get out of it. Plus, with the new agreements with Russia, the government has enough money to kind of keep the economy on the level where it is today.
And I'm sure you're keeping an eye on Russia as well and the protests that are starting to happen there against the Putin and Medvedev government.
Absolutely, and as it was rightly said, I think, by one of the experts, one of the foreign experts in our conference that took place in December here in Brussels, the democratization of Belarus may come with the democratization of Russia. So we are, of course, looking what's going on in Russia, and if something really happens there, it will surely have impact on Belarus.
And maybe one day we could have an Orange Revolution or an Arab Spring in Belarus.
You never know.
Right, Olga, from the Director of the Office for Democratic Belarus, thanks very much for joining me here today.
Thank you, my pleasure to be here.